International Workers' Day. We joined now on the line by the General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, SAFTU, Zwelinzima Vavi. Mr. Vavi, good afternoon to you and welcome to the SABC News channel.
Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to everybody listening. Thank you very much for inviting us to participate in your program.
Thank you so much for coming through. So I had a conversation earlier with COSATU's first deputy president, who was basically saying that because I was asking him about the relevance of still celebrating this day, whereas we still have workers who have many challenges, and he was basically saying that there is still a need to celebrate Workers' Day. What's the relevance of this day according to you?
I think the unions are even more relevant today than any other time in the history of humankind, judging by the crisis workers are facing in the workplace, in the context of the coronavirus epidemic. As we speak, we are inundated by telephone calls from workers across the country. You would have noticed that today, even the government employees working in the health sector, what we call the frontline services, are out and complaining that the government is not providing them with the necessary equipment they so desperately need to save lives of South African workers and the people in general. They do not have the adequate personal protective equipment that have been promised to them over and over again. If unions were not there, nobody will take up that specific issue. Across the country, there are complaints from workers that even in the context of the regulations announced by the president in March to combat the virus and to help stop its spread, workers are being forced to go to work. Employers are forging permits to get them to go to work. Workers are not being paid the promise to UIF. They discover now that the employers have been deducting, or some employers have been deducting their monies and not passing it over to the Department of Labor, and or that they have not had any deductions of any kind, and now they are being found, or they are finding themselves high and dry without any income in the context of today. Everywhere else, workers are complaining that despite the regulations in the mining industry, the issue of the personal protective clothing, the issue of hygiene, sanitizers, and issues of wearing masks and gloves is an issue that is good when said on national television, but it's not their living reality. Again, unions are called upon to come to the fore and to protect workers. And that's why, in fact, we asked the president to declare unions essential services in the context of today, because the lockdown affected the unions, and suddenly the employers had a field day during the time of the level of grade 5 or level 5 of the lockdown, where they were able to work with some workers. They unilaterally declare essential services, or that have been correctly declared as essential services, brutally exploiting them, exposing them to the disease. That's why we are returning to work with organizers on Monday to make sure that workers are offered the protections, more so in the context of a very weakened Department of Labor, which doesn't have adequate numbers of inspectors to enforce the regulations on the ground. So it is the stage where actually we should be celebrating the existence of the trade union movement instead of questioning its relevance at this moment.
And the reality is, the concerns really are not just around the safety of the workers during this COVID-19 pandemic, but jobs are already being shed, Mr. Vavi. Some companies have already indicated their intentions of not being in operation post this pandemic. So another area of concern right there workers losing their jobs.
And they've been losing their jobs even before COVID became a reality for South African population. There was a job loss bloodbath across the private sector. Standard Bank, Nedbank, ABSA, and many other companies were announcing and tripping over each other to announce that they are either involved in factory closures or they are scaling down or putting workers on part-time and all of that. And imagine if there was no unions to make the noise, what would have happened to the SABC workers as we speak? You remember there was a plan to cut over 4,000 workers there. Imagine if there was no NUMSA and SACA at the SAA to make all of the noises and to go to court and challenge the so-called rescue practitioner. What would have happened? That airline now would have been closed some time ago. And imagine what would have happened to Eskom workers. At some point, they were being offered a 0% increase. It took NUMSA and the NUM to demonstrate in the streets and to force the hand of the public enterprises minister. So unions have played their role, weakened as they are, fragmented as they are, unrepresentative as they are, because I think we shouldn't hide the fact that the trade union movement have tremendously been weakened over the period of 15 years now. At 2007, the trade unions in South Africa were at their strongest point. They were representing around 39, 40, 41% of all workers in the economy. Those numbers have gone down and to a mere 24% now. The unions did make their own fundamental mistake, commit their own errors. If unions had not committed those errors, we would have not seen the Marikana massacre, because the Marikana massacre, at the center of it, was that the workers have lost touch with the workers, the unions rather. Unions have lost touch with their own members, and the workers took it among to themselves to campaign that the issues they have been raising with the unions for years be taken up, and they did that successfully. Today, they have achieved the demand of 12,500, and they have new demand of 17,000 rands for a minimum wage. Imagine if the unions were strong, would have not seen the DDRN's farm workers uprisings in 2012, which led to workers themselves fighting their own battle and helping to increase their daily wage from 67 rands agreed to by the unions to way above 100 rands a day. There's no doubt about the fact that the unions have not always been good to themselves.
All right, Mr. Vavi, thank you so much for your reflections on this labor matters. But I think it's only fair for me to say, we know that you've recovered from COVID-19. How are you feeling? How have you been? Very quickly.
Well, I'm out of the danger, and I'm fine now. I've done everything that I was asked to do religiously, and I think that all of that helped. And so I've tested now negative. My entire family is now negative. And I want to make a call, two calls just quickly. The first call is to make a call to every worker, in particular in the black residential areas, where there are townships and rural areas, where there are many signs that show that workers are not complying with the regulations, are not staying at home, they are wandering around in the streets, they are allowing their kids to go play in the streets. They should know the danger that we are facing as humankind. This coronavirus is something bigger than any other thing we've ever heard of, at least in our country and in the world today. That's the first part. The second part is that we need to do more as a society to continue to protect the frontline workers. Today, the nurses, the doctors were demonstrating outside Baragwanath Hospital. We support those workers fully. They are calling on the government to provide them with the protective clothing and equipment that was promised, so that they themselves do not become the first victims of the coronavirus. Government must do more to protect its own workers. And we are worried that the schools are going to be open when the government can't even provide the protective equipment to health workers, how much more to teachers and to students.
All right. Zwelinzima Vavi, SAFTU's General Secretary, talking to us on the importance of Workers' Day via Skype. We take a quick break. Colin has